Hey everybody! So today we are going to talk about the North and South nodes in the 5th and 11th houses. These are just some ideas that I'm going to toss out. Nobody take these and be like, yes, all of these are absolutely accurate. All of them might be, all the ideas that I toss out might be accurate for you or for the chart that you're looking at. More than anything though, I want these to be like, just to kind of get your mind going, thinking. Some of these might need to be tailored to fit your specific chart or the chart that you're looking at. Really, these are just some ideas. Let's start with what the South Node is though. The South Node is thought of as where somebody's coming from like a past life lens. Now, when I say past life, this may be the most recent previous lifetime, or it may be 5 lifetimes back. When I look at the South Node, I think of it being as the previous lifetime most tied to this lifetime. Something that you needed to learn from that lifetime. And again, it could be the most recent one, most recent previous lifetime, or it could be a lifetime 5 or 6 lifetimes back. But you are comfortable. The South Node is where we are comfortable. That doesn't necessarily mean that we like it. It just means that we are comfortable there. We understand the energy by sign, house, and aspects made. We understand it. We might really like it. Sometimes we do. But more than anything, it's just known to us. And we can get comfortable there, stagnant there, not wanting to move away from there. Now, on the flip side of that, the North Node, on the opposite end of the axis, is what your soul wanted to grow into, wanted to evolve into in this lifetime by sign, house, and aspects made. Something about, wanting to understand the energy of the sign that the North Node is in, wanting to understand the areas of life by house that the North Node is in. Aspects made will flesh it out further, as will where the planetary ruler of the North Node falls by sign, house, and aspects made. So you'll want to look at all of this stuff along with any squares to the nodes, even though, you can look at the trines, the sextiles too, oppositions, all of this needs to be taken into consideration when reading the nodes. But anyway, so let's say we'll start with the South Node in the 11th house. So the houses in this context, since houses are areas of life, in the context of the South Node, you might be looking at, this is more like the backdrop, say the backdrop of the person's life, of this previous lifetime. So if you have the South Node in the 11th house, taking the sign out, just the house, you might be looking at somebody who spent a great deal of their previous lifetime, perhaps involved in social causes, humanitarian efforts. They could have been involved in rebellions and revolutions. These could be major things, right? Major revolutions, or they could be just minor ones, personal ones. Depending on what's going on, would kind of give you, in the chart, would kind of give you an idea as to how you might want to go with that. Groups of people, friends, not necessarily like, well, if you had like the planetary ruler of the 11th house and the 7th house, we might be talking about like ride or die, good friends. But the 11th house is more like groups of friends, like the friend groups that you have, acquaintances. Networking can also fall here too. So maybe these sorts of being involved in groups or in friend groups, these things could have also been important to you in this previous lifetime. You could have been very involved in things like groupthink. Or that could have been important to you in some way. Influence is another one. The 11th house can indicate influence. So perhaps you had a decent amount of influence if you've got the South Node in the 11th house. That's always possible. Or maybe you wanted more influence. That's always possible too, depending on what all is going on in the chart. Maybe you were looking to have that and maybe didn't quite find it the way you wanted to. Technology is another 11th house area of life. Now, and innovation. Now, when we think of technology, we think of technology in the present, right? But we're talking about past lives. So depending on what when this time period was that you lived, or somebody's chart that you're looking at lived, technology is not going to be like technology that we think of it now. But somebody with the South Node in the 11th house could have very easily had something to do with technology and innovation of the time period in which they lived. I think that's very possible too when you see a South Node 11th house person. Usually groups, there is something with groups. This could, and friends, just back to that for a second, there usually is. Sometimes there's too much immersion in this, and sometimes there's complete rejection of it. So you might have, you might be looking at somebody with the South Node in the 11th house where they are far too fixated and focused on groups and on groupthink and on things like that. And then sometimes you might find somebody with the South Node in the 11th house that completely rejects all of that and wants nothing to do with it. It depends on what all is going on in the chart, but I've seen it go both of those ways. And the other, the 11th house is very, it is very individual. It is, but it's individual in a more group way. Meaning, how do I want to put this? Like the 11th house South Node person, they might be an individual, but they need the group to help them feel that way, or they need other people to help them feel that way. They need to be a part of something that they feel like is more individualized, but on their own, as an independent person, they might not be able to do this as easily. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah. And then sometimes you'll see the South Node 11th house person where they don't like the groups, or they don't want to deal with groups and things so much. They feel like an outsider from these things, that they have a hard time. And because of this, they have a hard time being an individual too. Like it's almost like they reject it so much that it almost stifles them into being an individual too. I've seen it go both ways with that. Yeah. So if you have the South Node in the 11th house, that means you've got the North Node in the 5th house. Okay, so creative self-expression is one of the areas of life that the 5th house deals with. So if you've got the North Node in the 5th house, there really isn't a need for the person to learn something about creative self-expression. In taking the lead with this, not looking to the group for this, and not completely rejecting the group either, because I feel like the complete rejection of the group also kind of fucks with how the North Node 5th house person might actually express themselves individually, as an individual. Like it'll all be the way that if the South Node 11th house person completely rejects the group, then they might express themselves, or try to creatively express themselves in a way that's like the antithesis of the group that they're rejecting, but that's not totally organic either. So yeah, you kind of get what yeah. So the creative self-expression with the North Node in the 5th house is important. It is very important, but it needs to be an organic thing, and it needs to not be because they're just trying to do things totally different than the group. Or in the case of somebody who is way too immersed in the group with the South Node in the 11th house, they need to kind of let that go with the North Node in the 5th and be able to go after things on their own. Taking risks is very important for the person with the North Node in the 5th house. It usually is important. Feeling like they can do this, again, in a more independent way, not needing others' approval, things like that. Children are another part of the 5th house. Now, I'm careful when I say this because I know not everybody wants kids. So I'm certainly not saying that people that have the North Node in the 5th house have to have children. Could I see that perhaps children could somehow be a part of a 5th house North Node person's mission? Yes. But this could be in a lot of different ways. This could be in actually having your own children or adopting children. or in working with kids. Even if you had like the planetary ruler of the North Node in like the 6th house or in the 10th house, there could be something there about that too. But children can play in here. Playing in general is another thing that can play in here. Being able to play and not worry or not be so concerned about what other people think, and just being able to play and to express. Because there can be some of that worrying about what people think shit with the South Node in the 11th house. That needs to be let go of when you've got the North Node in the 5th. Things like, art hobbies are also a big deal for the North Node 5th house person usually. Having something that they enjoy doing, something that brings them joy, is probably important here. Exactly what that is, I don't know. It would depend on the entire chart. But that tends to play in. I think that's pretty good for that. So we'll flip it now. Let's say you have the South Node in the 5th house. So you might be looking at somebody who perhaps pleasure and joy and things like that, because I think of the 5th house. The 5th house is like the pleasure house. It's like the Dr. Feelgood house. And when you read the South Node, you always kind of want to veer it just a little bit more challenging, generally speaking. So, I mean, you can, while the 5th house is lovely, it's pleasure and it's joy and it's fun and it's entertainment and things like that. You can take that too far, and it's not productive, right? It's all, perhaps the South Node 5th house person, it was all about trying to feel good. Their life was somehow wrapped up in this and needing to feel good or wanting to feel good. This could have been their focus. There could be something with children. There could be, especially, like, I don't know, like if let's say the person had the planetary ruler of the South Node in the 4th house that deals with family and home, you might be looking at something like that. But there could be something going on with kids, with children from a previous lifetime lens. Perhaps being too wrapped up in them, perhaps revolving your life around them, perhaps not focusing on them enough. It could go a lot of different ways. It just depends on what all is going on in the chart. But I wouldn't rule kids out as being part of that past life story with the South Node in the 5th house. Leo in the 5th house, you don't have to think of natural rulership, but 5th house does have an affinity for Leo. Leo and the 5th house, they are like, they're bold, right? They're bold energy, can veer a little obnoxious sometimes. So there could have been kind of an obnoxious backdrop to this person's life. Could have been a little bit. Or something like that. Again, you want to veer it a little bit challenging, so you could go with it that way. This person could have been there could have been so much creative self-expression that they weren't able to give what they created to anything else outside of themselves. You might be looking at somebody who is very involved in themselves to such a degree that they weren't able to share anything with a group of people or things like that. There could be something going on there with that too. So if you have the South Node in the 5th house, that puts your North Node in the 11th house. Now, here it's kind of like you're needing to share things with people. There is a sharing. There is a needing to kind of get involved in some capacity in groups, in social causes, in humanitarian issues, bringing yourself into these realms of life. That tends to be the big one when you, and again, it kind of depends on what all is going on in the chart, but that does seem to be a big part of it. Like, let's say somebody has their South Node in the 5th house, and perhaps it does seem like it has to do with kids, right? Like they were way too focused on their kids. Their whole life revolved around their children. And they have their North Node in the 11th house in this lifetime. This lifetime, and now I'm certainly not saying that the 5th house South Node person shouldn't take care of their kids in this lifetime or shouldn't have children. I'm not saying that at all. But there does need to be most of the time there does need to be like a balance. Like this person needs to make sure that they have time for their own friends, for their own long-term goals. 11th house is also long-term goals. Long-term goals for the North Node 11th house person is going to be very, very important. Having those is going to be very important, and it might be difficult for them at times to kind of flesh those out, but they do need to have them. It needs to be, depending on what's going on with the fifth house South Node, it could be about them not wanting to share things with groups, not wanting to give things to the world at large, being too involved with their kids. There is a need to put themselves out there more in other ways with other people, to share what they know, what they have, the gifts that they have from their South Node in the 5th house. But yeah, I think that's pretty good. I will, again, these are just some ideas, like play with them with your own chart or with the chart that you're looking at, see if they fit. Some might fit completely, you might have to, tailor them a little bit, but yeah, I'm gonna get going. I will put where you can find me below in the description box, and I will also put, if you are interested in the star cards, because they are gorgeous and very useful, I will put where you can find them in the description box too. Okay, y'all. I'll see y'all later.